Hi there. We have a third line day. We are looking at gate 12, and it's the third line called confession. There's a lifetime learning which says the process of self-analysis. And Ra said that this is really kind of funny. The exaltation is in Neptune. And it's funny because Neptune veils things. So we have this sort of process of self-analysis, and yet it's veiled. It's very third line in a way, because it's sort of bumping into things and not knowing what they're bumping into because everything is a bit fuzzy. So Ra says the 12-3, this is where we can find people who can be deeply disturbed. Due to the bonds being made and broken, it can be impossible for them to be still. They're constantly in opposition to themselves in that way. They are constantly stepping into the emotional energy of the solar plexus. And the moment that it's connected, then they go through the process of trial and error. And he says that this line can generate sort of hatred almost. These are people that hate or are hated, or, mostly it's just a lot of hatred around them. It can be self-hatred. And it can be a very deeply disturbing energy to sit in, to have it yourself, and also to sit in when you're in aura with someone that has it. Hating themselves, it's very much a sort of what Ra found when he started introducing human design. And he noticed that so many people he was talking to just didn't love themselves at all. And then he said the thing with self-hatred is that usually of what you're hating is the not self. So you're not even in a sort of an honest relationship with your hate somehow. But it's brutal. This is a kind of a brutal line, a bit like the gate 10, line 3, the martyr, part of the same individuality after all. These are people who can be very burned at the stake emotionally. So confession is the name of the line. And in the exaltation, it says the recognition of inadequacies and the purging of unjustified vanities. The expression of inadequacies in social interaction that leads to self-analysis and caution. This is a classic of third lines. They can be a bit freaky, Ra says, because they are designed at some level to be social, but then they don't really know how to be social. So they kind of blunder in and they bump into things, and they find out that eating with your fingers at a formal dinner party isn't really the way to go about things, and they get burned. And of course, they learn from that. And next time they might be more cautious. Although that's not always a third line trait, of course. And none of this really stops them, because it's their process. It's what is supposed to happen. And as long as it's happening correctly, then the correct lesson is learned from it. In the detriment, a perverse and often exaggerated self-hatred, inadequacies in social interaction that lead to an expression of self-hatred. Ra said that this is one of the detriments that kind of gives detriments a bad name. But he also said that it's a good thing, because the more fixed you get on a detriment being bad, then ultimately you'll come to the point of just cracking and realizing that it's not real. And he does remind us that it can take 40 or 50 years to go through that trial and error process and get to a point where you can really put across your explanations successfully as a stranger in a social environment and bring your mutation out. For all of that to happen seamlessly and correctly, there's a lot of that lifetime learning. That's a huge part of it, isn't it? Self-analysis. It's not something that you're born with. Individuals are routinely and regularly rejected, and so they have to develop a fairly thick skin. And to begin with, there can be quite a lot of pain around that. And remember, the theme of standstill is it's a stop codon. It's that full stop at the end of a sentence. It's the pause, if you like, before something new begins. Individuality operates in that pulse energy, and the pulse comes in its own timing. It's not a rhythmic pulse that you can rely on. Ra tells us that both the exalted and the detriment are painful in this line, because the trial and error process can be painful wherever it's found. It's just that the pain is experienced differently depending which end of the scale you're on. It's the 12 threes who recognize that to be social is something that is actually deeply profound and difficult, and that until they can master the emotional system, they can find no grace. Grace, of course, being the gate at the other end of the channel, gate 22. Undefined emotional people can be incredibly graceful, but the greatest grace in the world is the aware emotional being. They're like water moving or clouds drifting. You know, there's a perfection in all of that, and it's so important to keep in balance. Respect for the nature of the emotional system, you know, despite the chaos that it brings as it functions now. And no one knows this better than a gate 12, you know, because it carries the mutative force and it recognizes that. It recognizes that it's only when you get to the transpersonal that you can get to a place where the mutation can be passed on. You're not going to find that in this trial and error third line, lower trigram. And the 11 in the line 3. This is called the realist. So perhaps the realist can bring some awareness to our 12 threes that everything changes. You know, that everything, even peace and even anger, and maybe even hatred, you know, it's all transitory. There's a deep truth here that can be hard to see when there's no discovery coming forward from that trial and error process, when the mutation isn't there, when you're not in the mood. A deep truth that could actually bring some relief. You know, it's one of those, it's okay. This too will pass. That's the reality. We have Venus on the move today. She goes into gate 15, the gate of extremes, gate in the G center. That's all about the love of humanity or not. And Venus brings us an appreciation for beauty, for love, and an awareness around what we value. So maybe some questions could be, do you value your own rhythms? Do you value humanity even? Which may sound like a strange question, but some people don't. The nature of the world we live in. We've got everything here, haven't we? And what about your own humanity? Do you ever think about that? Let's have a look at the moon. The moon is in gate 18 still, the splenic center, moving into gate 48, which is that sort of same stream. It goes from the 58, the 18, across the splenic center into the 48, up to the 16 in the throat. And gate 48 is called depth. It's the gate of depth, and it's the well that slowly gets filled up drop by drop by drop over many, many years. It has a deeply rooted instinctual memory, and it's very good at problem solving, has a great wisdom for problem solving. There can be feelings of inadequacy here and a lot of fears, you know, around the splenic center. And there can be an insecurity or a fear about getting caught out, for being seen as being shallow, you know, and not having enough depth. And then gate 57 at 0151. This is the gentle, the intuitive clarity that comes from the splenic system. The ability to penetrate to the core of any situation in the moment and find clarity. It is focused and it's alert to physical danger, and it can act very quickly when it feels threatened. The fear here is the fear of the future, fear of tomorrow. And then we also have, because of this, the channel of the brainwave. This is a design of awareness. So this is the moon in 57 meeting the gate 20 in Jupiter. So the energy here is like, I don't know how I know, but when the time comes, I know that I will know, and I will know now. This is a channel that can see the truth very quickly, much more quickly than others. And it doesn't mean it has to be shared, of course, because you can lose friends that way when you're seeing so cleverly and clearly and instinctively the truth of what's happening. Some people aren't ready for that. It's a projector channel, so it has that keynote of wait to be invited, which is always good advice for anything to do with projectors. So that's our gate and line for today. And thank you for joining me. And as always, go gently, take care, and I'll see you tomorrow.